What a blessing to be able to worship the Lord with a wonderful team. As always, I was privileged last week to speak in one of my friends' church, and to come back today and be in my own church. That's a joy. To worship with my people and with our wonderful, wonderful worship team that leads us to come into God's presence. And as we were singing this morning, I thank God for a time, we call it creative worship, and we met yesterday again, where we sit and we do a planning for a whole month of what we're going to do on Sunday mornings. And I thank God for that team that works with me. When we were singing again this morning, I just thought, what an amazing way that this was just put together to lead us into God's holy presence. And I thank God for that. I thank God for a church that works with the gifts that He gives. Some of you were away like me. Many said, welcome back to me, welcome back. I know some folks who were in the UK. I hope it was a wonderful conference that you had. Alexander's still there. He hasn't come back yet. He's only coming back next week. So some just stay. I hope it was fruitful. Maybe you can come teach us some of the stuff that you learned at the conference. I wasn't here to say goodbye to my brother Peter. And my heart still is with you, Margaret, and with your family. I'm going to miss him. Sunday mornings, he would walk past me every Sunday and just touch my shoulder and say, hey, champ. So someone's going to have to start doing that. Can't do it without him. After Easter Sunday, we usually talk a little bit about what Jesus came to do when He rose from the dead and what that means for us. So I'm taking you back a little before that, and then next week we'll go to after the resurrection again. Today we're going to John chapter 11, and we're going to start reading at verse 17. We're not going to read the whole passage. We're going to do 17 to 27, and then we'll skip to verse 38 and then go down to 44 from there. So Lazarus has died. They sent Jesus the message, and then Jesus takes his time to get there. And then we read in verse 17. On his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. It's an interesting number, the number 4. You'll see it a second time a little later in verse 39 again. Just before I finish the reading. In those days, they believed that when you died, the spirit would hover over the body for 3 days, in the hope that maybe it would come alive and the spirit would go back in the body and the body would live again. After 3 days, if the body did not revive, the spirit would then leave and go away. So the number 4 is very significant. He's dead. He's really dead. So don't miss that. It's just sometimes, John likes these little number things. He likes playing with that. So on his arrival, Jesus found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb for 4 days. Now, Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, and many Jews had come to Martha and Mary to comfort them in the loss of their brother. When Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him, but Mary stayed home. Lord, Martha said to Jesus, and I'm going to add a word because the Greek adds the word, if only you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask. Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. And Martha answered, I know he will rise again in the resurrection at the last day. And Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. And the one who believes in me will live even though they die. And whoever lives by believing in me will never die. Do you believe this? Yes, Lord, she replied, I believe that you are the Messiah, the Son of God who is to come into the world. Then we go to verse 38. Jesus, once more deeply moved, came to the tomb. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. Take away the stone, he said. But Lord, said Martha, the sister of the dead man, by this time there is a bad odor, for he has been there 4 days. And then Jesus said, Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? So he reminds her of the words in verse 24, 25, 26, 27. So they took away the stone. And then Jesus looked up and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you sent me. When he had said this, Jesus called in a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The dead man came out. His hands and feet were wrapped with strips of linen and a cloth around his face. And Jesus said to them, take off the grave clothes and let him go. Sorry. So, there's a story about this guy who went to a party, had a good time. Unfortunately, he drank one or two drinks too many. So he decided he's not going to drive home, he's going to just walk home. And decided to take a shortcut which took him through the cemetery. During the week, they dug a new grave in the cemetery. And because it was dark and he wasn't all there, he kind of fell into this grave. Scary moment. So he tried his best to try and get out of the grave, but try as he could, nothing happened. So he decided, oh well, I'll just go lie in the one corner and sleep until tomorrow when the workers come, and then I'll yell and they'll get me out. So he fell asleep. Another guy went to the same party, did the same thing and took the shortcut. And unfortunately for him, he too got to the same grave, didn't see it, slipped, fell into the grave. And he really tried his best trying to get out of this grave as much as he could. He made such a ruckus that he woke up the other guy. The other guy walked up gently to this guy and he tapped him on the shoulder and he says, you won't get out of here. And he did. The reason I start with a silly little story is because sometimes when we look at life, it seems that so many people are living in an open grave and they can't get out. There's a lot of, forgive my bad English word, deadness in this world. And we see it on many levels. We'll often see it on a personal level where people are just dead. I saw that again this time visiting back home and sitting with one of my friends, and I was hoping to have a really good conversation, and we did. But it was a sad conversation because this person was living in a grave. And as we spoke, he said, some days I just feel dead, and I just feel that I'm not going anywhere. I'm just stuck there. And we spoke about why he feels like that. And then I asked him the question. I said, so what do you do about this? You know what he answered me? I work harder, I drink more, and I buy more stuff. Still in the grave. Still dead. We sometimes see this deadness on the relationship level, and that's something that's close to my heart. I really struggle with this because I don't know what we as a church can do about this. The most important thing that God gave us was this wonderful gift of relationships with each other, with our God, with community, with mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, family. And we're messing that up so badly. Maybe it's my job that I see a lot of relationships that are messed up and that break and that don't work. You go look at the statistics and you see that even the most wonderful, sacred relationship that God gives of a husband and a wife, they don't work, they don't last, they break. You look at families and you see the brokenness and the deadness in families because somehow, and this is just my little pet peeve, and forgive me for a moment, the problem I think comes in our relationships because we live on screens, through screens, and for screens. And we don't have this time with each other anymore. And we're in the same house, but we're not in the same house. Sending text because one is upstairs and one is downstairs. Locking myself in my room rather than doing my little thing on my computer than spending time. It's scary. There's a silly little movie. And one scene in this movie, it's called Shirley Valentine. It's an old movie. You can see the deadness in their relationship. So she makes, it's an English movie, so they call it chips. We call it fries. She makes chips and eggs on Thursday. And usually she makes steak on a Thursday. So her husband is ticked off to her at the nth degree. Why did you make chips and eggs on a Thursday and not my steak? He's so mad that he even pokes his finger into the egg. And then he just takes that plate and he just throws it over the table, hits her plate, and her chips and her eggs fall in her lap. She gets up and she walks to the pantry and she opens the door and there's this big poster of Greece, and she says, trying to save a little money so you and I could spend some time together. I thought we could go do a holiday. And he loses it at her. And then somewhere in this movie she says the words, maybe the greatest sin in life is the sin of not living life. And we see so much of that when we lose relationships and we live in open graves. We sometimes see this open grave deadness in community. And I thank you, Gregory, who is up there now, this morning when you said this community. And we're taking hands with the other communities and other churches, because sometimes our communities have changed so much that they become inward looking and inward working. And instead of being that place where you are safe and cared for and loved, and you know that those people are around you, it just doesn't happen. I thank God for a community like Central Church, where we do love and we do care and we do see compassion and we do reach out. And please never change. But often we see that, and community is the place in which we live. We cannot live without community. God made us to be part of that. We don't do well when we're like this. Ask me, I'm an only child. It's not fun when you're like this. But I don't want to go on to that. I just want to use this to preface where we are going with this amazing passage that we read this morning. Because the passage is the opposite of what I just spoke. It's all about life and the abundance of life, and that life that becomes part of our life, and how we can become God's agents in this world of living this new life and changing those grave moments, changing the deadness in this world. So let me take you to the text, but let me say this in the beginning. We can look at the text on two levels. The first level is how I would usually do this, and working with it as a historical text, which it is. There is a place called Bethany. Been there. Maybe in 2 years' time we're going to go to Israel again and we'll go walk through Bethany. There was a man called Lazarus who died. There was a Martha. There was a Mary. They were historical, and I believe that with all my heart. That's the story that happened. But I want to take you beyond this story a little bit, and I want to take us to a contemporary application for our own lives. Because sometimes I think we're Lazarus too. Sometimes we land in a grave and there's a stone and it keeps you behind and you can't come out. But in the story, Jesus shows up. And often for us, Jesus shows up. And when Jesus shows up, God shows up and the miracles happen. And that's what I want to talk about from the story this morning. How God shows up when sometimes we are behind the stone and does the miracles. So Jesus gets there. He's too late. He knows he's going to be too late. Lazarus is dead. He just walks into this whole little town and you can feel the deadness around. And then Martha just says it. Lord, if only you were here, my brother wouldn't have died. It's a little bit of an accusation. And here's the thing, my friends. Sometimes, forgive me, but sometimes I think so many of us live in an if-only world. If only I'd studied harder for the test. Put in your leg, Matthew. He's always studying hard. If only I'd followed a different career path, my life would have looked so different. What are we doing? We're pointing the fingers all the time. If only I hadn't said those things then. If only I didn't do what I did. If only. If only. But the problem with an if only life is this. It traps us in the past. It robs us of the future. And it makes it impossible to live in the present. You're back in the grave. And you can't get out. If we try and live an if-only life, you're done. You're trapped in the past. You have no future. And you can't live in the present. Maybe the only good thing about if only is that it can set us up for the miracle of life that God has. Because look what happens. When she says these accusing words to Jesus, he doesn't go back at her. Jesus just says, Martha, your brother will live. And Martha has the textbook answer that we have. Oh yes, at the resurrection. In the last days, when the Christ shall come again, we shall all rise and we will be with God. And she says, you got that one all wrong, bud. I am. And you know that's John. He's always got the I am because he reminds us of who Jesus is. When God said in Genesis, I am, it's the same God saying, I am. But I also want you to hear these words for 1 second. I am. Not I will be, not I will become, not it will happen one day. I am now, right now, here, in this moment, the resurrection and the life. It doesn't happen one day. It doesn't just happen in the last days. Yes, we'll all rise in the last days. But the moment Jesus Christ comes into your graveyard life, I am the resurrection and the life. And it changes. And it's not if only. It is, yes, Lord, I am the resurrection and the life. And whoever lives and believes in me will live, even though they have died. Because whoever lives believing in me will not die. 17 years ago, I preached on John 11 in this church. And I said to you, and you kind of looked at me strange. I said to you, I'm never going to die. And I'm saying that to you again. I am never going to die. This old body, yeah, it's going to say goodbye to this world at some stage. I'm fine with that. But me, child of God, the one who has been touched by the resurrection and the life, I'm going to live forever. And nothing in this world can take that away. No grave, no stone, no if only, nothing in this world. Because Jesus is the resurrection and the life here and now. And that's the life he wants us to live. And that's the life he gives. And if we were in a good old Baptist church, someone would say, Amen. Because that's the truth. Don't live in the grave. Don't wait for someone to fall in the grave next to you and frighten you out of the grave. You don't have to. Just look up and see the Lord Jesus. And he says, is it tough? Is it hard? Is it difficult? I am the resurrection and the life. And I give that life now, life in abundance. Do you believe that, Martha? Do you believe that, Central? That he is. He's the one who makes us come alive so we can live again in this world. But for that, here's the thing. When he says that, just think of this for a second. It's not just this waiting for the one day, the future. The moment Jesus says that, he brings the future into the present. Don't have to wait for it anymore. He brings the what we think the up there into the down here. Because this is it already. He makes this life possible now. For that to happen, we need to look at something that happens there too. So we read verse 38, 39. Jesus goes back to this grave. And there's this huge stone in front of the grave. And he says, roll away the stone. For us to live this life, to get out of the grave, we need to roll away the stones. Because that's what keeps us back. And there are many stones. Stones of guilt sometimes that keep me back. The stones of addiction, and when I speak of addiction, I'm not just talking about methamphetamines, and I'm not just talking about all kinds of other drugs and stuff. I'm also talking addictions like the stuff that we hold in our hands that I just spoke of a little earlier. I think that's the worst addiction that we have right now, worse than any of the others. We need to let those stones be taken away. The stones of relationship hurt and brokenness. Because here's the thing. If I don't roll away the stone, I'm stuck in that grave. And the resurrection and the life is standing right there in front of me, but the stone is still there. And forgive me for this example, but maybe it's the best I have. It's like this person who's addicted to alcohol, but he keeps the bottle in a brown paper bag because at least he can't see the bottle. Because the moment you take it out, you are confronted with a stone. Can we take the stones away? Because it doesn't do us good. Hiding behind them keeps us in the grave. Allowing the stones to be taken away sets us free and sets us up for a new life that is promised through the resurrection and the life himself. When that stone is away, did you see what happens? He calls, Lazarus, come out. He doesn't gate crash it. He doesn't kick away the stone. Roll it away, and then I'll call. And he calls by name. Jane, Matthew, Bradley, Aubrey, George, Gohar, come out. Walk from that grave into this new life. For that's what he gives. The grave is nothing but death. Grave is nothing but if-onlys. But the moment we can let the stone roll away and we hear the voice, we can walk out and I am set free. We have a beautiful song that we sing, I am set free. Oh, it's for freedom that I am set free. The story ends in a beautiful way. Two things. He comes out of the grave, but he's still dressed in the grave clothes. They're still all around him. And what does Jesus say? He looks at the people and he says, take the grave clothes off of him and let him go. Can I take you back to the word community? Community is part of my life. And it's them that he says, go take the clothes off. You be there for him. He's not on his own. Go be there for him. He's going to need you. She's going to need you. When you come out, you need those to help you take those clothes off and get rid of them and take you in their hands and carry you so that you can become strong and can live that life that you have not lived for such a long time. We need each other. We need each other in this community. I cannot live alone. I cannot live this life alone because I slip and I fall in. I don't want you to scare me. I want you to bend over and help me out. Because that's what we do in community. And yeah, we're different. And here's the thing about Jesus. His community is an amazing community. It's so different. You can't say, yeah, I like Mrs. So-and-so and I like Mr. So-and-so, but man, that Mr. So-and-so, I don't like him. Can you just go down the street to the Anglicans? Doesn't work that way in Jesus' community. We're all part of that community. And we need to love brothers and sisters. And we need to help them so that they can go free and live free this life that Jesus gives. So come alive, Central. Allow him to take the stone away and throw away the if-onlys and walk free. Free from, and you can add whatever you want. Free to, and you can add whatever you want. But he gives the gift of life. Amen. Take a few moments of silent prayer.